Welcome to the class. Today, we are going to talk about structure and function of conditionals in English. We will describe you what conditional means. We will describe the context in which conditional sentences occur, and we will also describe what functions they perform in English. Needless to say, a good understanding of these nuances will make your English impactful. You will be able to use these types of sentences properly, appropriately, in appropriate contexts for both writing and speaking. Once you know how to put these things appropriately, both your writing and speaking, which are externally manifestable abilities in language, becomes better. At the same time, I would like you to know that your language looks impressive outward in your performance only when you allow them to prevail in your subconscious. In simple words, when you try understanding about these things without memorizing them, your language becomes impactful. It has serious implications for learning. Hence, we request you to pay attention to the summarized nuances that we are going to give you as part of understanding how to use conditionals and how we understand better on the basis of these structural elaborations how these structures function in the language. Let's move on and look at it. As the name suggests itself, conditional or conditionals mean something. They manifest themselves only in the form of a complex sentence. In other words, one sentence will have two sentences in it, where one sentence is the main clause, or what we call them independent clause, and the second one is conditional. The clause that we mark conditional is not complete, hence they are not independent clauses, and we call a clause independent only when it can stand on its own as well. So when you read few sentences here, you will understand what we are talking about. So the conditional clauses are called conditional clauses because it contains an if type of element in it. Technically speaking, they are subordinate clauses, that is, they are not independent on their own. So look at the example here. I'll invite her for lunch at home if Naina rings me. Please pay attention to this sentence carefully. While learning these nuances at this stage also entails paying attention to these things carefully. Many times, often we feel we know these things. We feel we don't need to pay attention to them. We already know these things. But you will be surprised when you pay attention to them. Because when we start paying attention to sentences, we not only pay attention to one specific thing that we are discussing at that point in time, we are also subconsciously processing multiple information that are relevant for making various different parts of language impactful for us. And these things happen without us being consciously aware of them. Hence, let's read this sentence again. I will invite her for lunch I'll invite her for lunch at home if Naina rings me. Now, Pay attention to the things that we were discussing. Main point that we are talking about, if Naina rings me. This is a subordinate clause. I will invite her for lunch at home. This is an independent clause. So, subordinate, independent or main clause. Why? As I said, this part can stand on its own as well. It does not need help of anything else. That is, I'll invite her for lunch at home. This is a good declarative, simple sentence. However, if Naina rings me, though this is a sentence, an independent use of this sentence gives a sense of incompletion. Hence, this is called a subordinate clause. Now, in the context of the totality, this whole thing is one sentence. And therefore, we call it a complex sentence because it contains two. The two parts are the main clause and subordinate clause. Please understand, we call this one sentence because a bigger sentence, a complex sentence is also a sentence. We will look at the nature of complex sentences in some other class, at some other time. At this moment, let's focus on conditional, and in the process we are going to look at a complex sentence because, as we mentioned in the beginning, most often a conditional sentence is an example of a complex sentence. In other words, it will have both a subordinate clause and a main clause. So, conditional clause becomes a subordinate clause, and often it comes with an if type of element. If simply indicates the precondition for one to happen. Precondition, if clause indicates precondition, and that precondition is for something else to happen. In other words, the information in the main clause would become a possibility only when the information in the subordinate clause materializes. If not, then the second one also doesn't have any validity. Hence, this is called a conditional clause. That is, though the conditional clause is a subordinate clause, it determines the main clause. So, hope this is making sense so far, and you understand the structure of a conditional clause. Later, we will look at parts of conditional clause, that is, other parts of the structure of a conditional clause, and in the process, we will look at the function so that we understand the context when we use these conditional sentences. In the meantime, before we move forward, please look at one more part. I will invite her for lunch if she rings me. This sentence does not need a comma before a conditional sentence begins. But look at it. If we reverse the order, that is, the if clause may precede or follow. Look at this. In our elaborations on conditionals, we are telling you that if clause may precede or follow. That is, the order of a subordinate clause and a main clause is not fixed. You can put them in any order. However, this is the point where we need to pay attention to. If the subordinate clause follows the main clause, we don't need a comma. However, if the subordinate clause precedes the main clause, then we need a comma at the end of the subordinate clause. Look at the sentence below. If Naina rings me, comma, I'll invite her for lunch at home. This is the important information that we need to pay attention to. This is really nuanced. We feel they are the same thing. We feel we know and we don't need to pay attention to. However, if we write this sentence with a comma, that is the second one, and we speak this sentence with a pause, it sounds better and in turn we sound impactful. Another information one needs to pay attention to. Probably it will apply to many other sentences that we are going to see later while looking at the function of conditional clauses. What are they? Read this first sentence. I'll invite her for lunch. If you just look at this whole sentence, let me name it 1 and 2. If you're reading sentence number 1, until you reach the subordinate clause, you don't really know who her refers to. And when you hear the name Naina, then you understand it's going to be, we are talking about inviting Naina. That is, I will invite her for lunch at home. If we have only this much, then we know we are talking about somebody who is a female. But we don't know that person until the second clause gives you the name Naina. It's a possible structure because pretty soon we are going to establish the connection between the two. And then the dependence of these two, A and B, is going to get established. However, we can also say, I'll invite Naina for lunch at home if she rings me. That you see in this sentence, in the second one. So, usually we have put these sentences for you to understand. Both are grammatical, but the reference to the name in the first clause, whether we speak it as a condition, as main clause first, subordinate clause later, or subordinate clause first, main clause later. In both cases, if we put Naina first, that is the name first, then the reference becomes easier. And then your listener does not need to wonder. Conclusion, I leave for you. Hope this makes sense. So far we have looked at what's a complex sentence and how does it become a complex sentence. We have looked at the components of a complex sentence, that is an independent clause or a main clause and a subordinate clause. And then we have also looked at the possibility that one can follow the other. However, what we need to keep in mind if it follows in terms of a comma and in terms of reference to the name. This much gives you good enough idea about the structure of the conditionals. Now we are going to turn our attention to the function of conditional, and for that we need to look at different types of conditional clauses. They are going to be named as 0 conditional, 1 conditional 1, conditional 2, conditional 3 and so on. They have differences and they refer to different contexts. Let's go through them one by one. So what is a 0 conditional? What we want to know, a 0 conditional. It's used when we are talking about general truth or natural laws or general facts. Such type of sentences are called 0 conditionals. Look at the example. If you drive above 120 km per hour on the expressway, you will be penalized. So, you will be penalized is the main clause here. But for this penalty to occur, there is a condition. It happens only if you drive above 120 km per hour. So, it's sort of a fact and therefore it is called 0 conditional. The clay becomes sticky if you add water to it. Here, the main clause precedes and the conditional clause follows. The clay becomes sticky if you add water to it. Remember, here we have tried to put the noun first and the pronoun later. In the previous sentence, both of them were pronouns, didn't matter. But ideally speaking, you would want to put a noun first, whether it is a part of conditional clause or a main clause, because the co-reference or interpretations of reference becomes easier in the cases where we have two sentences talking about one individual. So, the clay becomes sticky if we add water to it. It refers to what? It refers to clay. Something more about it. The zero conditional is used to refer to time that is now and always the situation that a real possibility. So, it gives you a sense of present tense and it's going to refer to a real possibility, that is real and possible. Adding water to clay and it becoming sticky is sort of a fact. Driving fast and getting penalized, these are facts. The verb in both if clause and the independent clause are used in their simple forms. That is, if they are present, they are simple forms. That's the structure and function of zero conditional. Second type is post conditional. This is used to talk about a situation that have real possibilities. So look at it. Now it's a situation or situations having real possibilities. And the time referred to, it refers to future, an activity in future. So look at the examples. If the price of orange rises, demand will fall. So what will lead to the falling demand? If the price rises. Here is the conditional, first one, second one is the main clause. The doctor will not consult the patient if she does not have her blood work done. The doctor will not consult the patient, main clause, if she does not have her blood work done. So, it's still a conditional, but remember, sort of it's a situation, but a real possibilities, meaning it will happen. It has possibility to become true. And if you pay attention to the structure, the if clause and the independent clauses are used in simple present tense, and so one is simple present, one is future tense. You can check which clause is in future and which clause is in simple present tense. To give you the answer to that, the main clause will always remain in future because it is main clause is going to talk about possibility if the condition meets. Now we are looking at second conditionals. It refers to situations that are unreal. So the first conditional was about real possibilities, second is unreal and hypothetical or unlikely situations. Again, the time is referred to its present and future. Let's look at example. If we had an oven, we would grill mushrooms. It's the main clause. I might apply for a loan. Look at this. If we had an oven, we would grill mushrooms. This is the conditional clause, and conditional clause ends with a comma and then the main clause starts. I might apply for a loan if I had to build a house. Conditional clause follows the main clause, no comma here. I might apply for a loan if I had to build a house. So, because these are hypothetical or unlikely situations, in the verb of the if clause, we use simple past, we use past tense, and in the main clause we are using modal verbs, that is modal auxiliaries. You would always see could here, might here, and would here. If I had lot of money, I would buy an airplane. So, conditional sentence, main clause. Hope this gives you an idea of understanding second conditional. My point here is not to make you memorize what is first conditional, what is second conditional, and what is zero conditional, or in that order, zero, first and second. The idea is to understand that when we say conditional clauses, it helps us understand that we are going to be talking about a sentence that has one condition in it. The moment we say one condition in it, the condition is going to be predicated upon something, which means the condition has to materialize first, and only then the second one, that is the one that is given in the main clause, is going to be true. Having said that, when we look at these things and their function, if we pay attention to the placement of comma, to see which one precedes, the possibility that both, there is no strict restrictions on it, in the sense that depending upon the situation, a conditional clause may precede or follow the main clause. But in the main clause, depending upon real and unreal or unlikely situations, we may have different kinds of verb forms used. This is what we want your attention to. Once you understand them properly, uses of them in your English when you write or speak will add huge confidence. The possibility of practicing and using grammatically correct and contextually appropriate sentence is, these two things are key to confidence. I do not need to underline the significance of confidence in speaking a newly learned language, that also in a professional domain. Let's move on and see the other possibilities. This is the type where if follows the verb be and have the following. That is, when if follows verb be, if I were you, if she were the captain, so when we see these types of sentences, that is a condition. If I were you, if she were the captain, the team would win. I would fix the leakage on my own. If I were you, I would ask my sister to pursue higher studies. See, the following constructions are commonly heard, meaning we use these things quite often. If she was the president, no one would dare to cheat the public. The game would end soon if he was the opening player. What actually happens is we need to use these kinds of conditionals. If I were you, I would fix the leakage on my own. If she were the captain, the team would win. So, the uses and understanding it, these uses makes your understanding more and more complete and feeds the subconscious with confidence. Let's look at third conditionals. What happens in this? Here we are talking about a situation that imagines a chance in the past leading to a different result of the change. Please read these things carefully. We are talking about a situation that imagines a change in the past leading to a different result of that change. Look at the example. If I had prepared well, I would have scored good marks. Meaning, we are imagining a situation in the past leading to a different result. So, this kind of conditional, if I had prepared well, this is third conditional, because if this condition, if you meet this condition, then the result would have been different in the past. I would have scored good grades. I would have passed the exam. We wouldn't have lost the match if our fielders had played well. Look at it, comma, no comma. If our fielders had played well, we wouldn't have lost the match. So the result in the past would have been different if this condition meets. That is called third conditional. And it's a conditional because, not just because it begins with a possibility, but the whole thing remains a probability. So the verb in the if clause, pay attention to the verb in the if clause, past perfect form, and the independent clause uses would, that is a modal auxiliary followed by auxiliary have. Just as a footnote, remember, modal auxiliaries do not indicate tense. However, they can be used in a tense sentence. This is a matter that we need to address in a different class. Right now, we only want you to focus on conditional clauses, conditional sentences, and its functions. There is something called mixed conditionals. As the name suggests, you would understand, this structure is used to imagine a situation where a change in the past would have result in the present. That is, I am imagining a change in the past that would have given a different result in the present. If I had not won the lottery, I would not be on a world tour. So look at the condition. If the result was different in the past, it would have different impact in the present time. I would not be on a world tour. If clause uses perfect tense and the independent clause uses would, that is a modal auxiliary. Remember, keep in mind why we call it a mixed clause, because it is used to imagine a situation where a change in the past would have result in the present. I mean, it would show impact on the present circumstances. And a change in the present would mean a different past as well. So it's both ways. Hence we call it a mixed conditional. Example is, if it wasn't urgent, I wouldn't have called you today. So in the if clause, past tense, and would in the main clause, and that means, so what's the impact? Change in the present would mean a different past as well. So if it wasn't urgent, so we are talking to somebody, if it wasn't urgent, I wouldn't have called you. We use these sentences to indicate that it was urgent for me to make a call to you. So the conditional sentences can also be used for functions of request, adding more politeness. Just take this situation as an example. You are making a call to somebody whom you usually don't call, and they don't expect your calls. Then, putting it in this form, if it wasn't urgent, I wouldn't have called you today, makes your expression polite. And that can fetch a positive results. So, you would have heard that language has the magic to derive intended outcome. All you need to know is to know how to use it properly. And that properly is no magic. That properly is allowing these things to run in your subconscious to give you impactful outcome without memorizing them. Please look at these things carefully, and also you need to look at examples. You need to watch out when you are going to be reading something, because that carefulness while reading has impact on how you speak. Thank you so much for today. See you next time with something new. Take care.